Hi, Brian. I recently came across your video where you pulled a banded 1,067 pound deadlift for a double. Do you believe you could have broken the 500 kilo barrier in 2016? And do you regret not attending the World Deadlift Championship that year? So in 2016, my deadlift was in a good spot and I was really building up to something big. And I had a conversation, as I mentioned here on the channel back in 2016, about going to the contest, you know, what the weight jumps were going to be. And really what I wanted to do was kind of pull something in that range. So, you know, maybe it would have been, you know, 1,060, 1,070. I wanted something between the 1,025 or 26 that they were going to do and then 1,100. So I wanted something in the middle. That's the jump that I was prepared to do. I just wanted to set a new personal best for me at that time. And that's what I really felt like I was prepared to do. I was not going to wear a deadlift suit because that is not something I have done. So I felt like I was prepared to pull somewhere around that range. So, you know, 1,050, 1,060, 1,070. At that time, I did say that I was not prepared and didn't feel like I was prepared to go after, you know, the 500 kilos. Again, for me, I was not going to wear a suit. I've performed my deadlifts that way just because it's important to me to pull them without the assistance of a suit. And I've also used regular straps. So, you know, maybe I should have considered doing that, but I don't really regret it. And they told me at that time they were not going to allow, it was not going to be allowed to have any type of jump between 1,025 or 6 and the 1,100 or 500 kilos. So I said after that conversation that I didn't want to come because I wanted to have a weight jump somewhere in the middle, and they weren't going to allow it because they had already set all the rules, which I disagreed with, and therefore I did not go. So to answer your question, no, I don't regret not going at all. You know, I would have pulled the 1,025 or 26 very easily at that contest had I gone. And then from there, I wanted a weight jump in the middle. So, you know, it's one of those things looking back, it would have been fun at that point to pull, you know, some weight in that range, you know, again, without a suit, with regular straps, just to kind of have it, you know, checked off my list. But the opportunity wasn't there because the promoters weren't willing to do a weight jump in the middle. And the way it played out, Eddie ended up lifting the 500 kilos at that contest, 1,100. So, you know, it didn't end in a tie at 1,026. He was able to do that, and that's how it played out. So, no, I do not regret at all not going based on the rules that were presented to me. What's your highest body weight ever? Highest body weight ever for me, I would say, was probably 2017 at World's Strongest Man. And I would think that I didn't actually weigh in at that point, but I was, I think, north of 460 pounds. So somewhere probably between 460 and 470, if I had to guess. But at that weight, I was very uncomfortable. I did not enjoy that at all. And, you know, it just kind of was a byproduct of training for those heavy weights that we talked about, you know, with the contest. It was just getting ready for that event and trying to be as prepared as I could for, you know, the squat, for the deadlift, for the Viking press. Going into that contest, there was a lot of events that required me to be very strong in one spot. So, you know, that the weight, you know, the eating went up and the weight went up, and I was very uncomfortable. I would say that's probably for me kind of the tipping point of being too heavy, where I just was on a daily basis, I was just beginning to be very miserable. So, you know, after that point in time, I did cut down and you know, kind of go a little bit different route with things. But that was, you know, around my biggest body weight. And again, I don't have an exact, because for me, I stopped weighing in leading up to World's Strongest Man, and I don't weigh in at World's Strongest Man just because it's not important, and I don't want to play any type of head games with myself going into a contest. You are arguably the GOAT of strongman, and I've enjoyed the content you have made throughout the years. Appreciate that. Do you have any tips on avoiding injury and the longevity you have had throughout your great career? So as far as this goes, having longevity, I think really comes down to training smart as well as listening to your body. So for example, you can have your training plan laid out, everything dialed in, and you walk into the gym and for whatever reason that day, you're just not feeling it. Your body's telling you, hey, this doesn't feel good, things aren't working right, you need to back off, but instead you push through and you kind of ignore your body talking to you and you don't really listen. That's where you can really get into trouble with injuries and things like that. But going through a training cycle and becoming more experienced with training in general, that's where you kind of go through some of those things and you learn when to listen, when to back off, when to push. And even though your program is written down and everything's laid out, that doesn't mean that on certain days you shouldn't back off. For example, if you've got something going on in your life that you're stressed about, maybe you didn't sleep good, maybe you missed some food for whatever reason, and it's just not the day to go after a big weight, or you're kind of dealing with some type of minor tweak or injury. Those are times where you really need to be smart, and the only person that can make those type of calls is you individually. So if you want to have longevity, this is something that I learned very early on in my career, is to listen to my body and listen to the indicators that are going on and just be smart, right? Because the tendency is, to push through, and there's that fine line between no pain, no gain, and pushing yourself to the point that you get injured. So you have to know when to push, when to back off, and that should help you in your path to having good longevity in training. Any plans in the future to do any TV shows / videos with Eddie? So I have been getting a lot of requests about doing something with Eddie Hall. Obviously, all of you really enjoy that. I enjoy hanging out with the guy in short bursts. Not too much, but it's been a while since we've got to kind of hang out together and have some fun. So I have reached out to Eddie, and we are in the works of trying to put something together, which is really exciting. And I think that's probably as much as I'm going to say at this point, but hopefully we can bring you guys something here in the not so distant future. Do you feel that the sport has changed from being a competition of pure strength to strength and quickness? And do you think that hurts you being as big as you are versus the smaller, more agile strongmen? This is a great question, and it's a topic that has certainly come up about the sport of strongman, and with especially the weights at World's Strongest Man and some of the other competitions that happen. And if you look back, the early 2000s, that time period, kind of going through to maybe the late 2000s, that time period really changed in the weights that were lifted during competition at World's Strongest Man. And there was quite a drastic difference, and the weights started getting heavier and heavier. And that kind of kept trending, if you will. So the weights, went up in weight, went up in weight, went up in weight until around 2017. And then 2017 was kind of, where we were lifting very, very heavy weights. There wasn't a ton of moving that was happening with that competition. And then, in 2018, it seemed like there was a big shift, not only at World's Strongest Man, but also at the Arnold Classic, in the weights and in the way the events, were kind of presented. And that trend has kind of went on. So it's almost like it went from being a little bit lighter, like I said, if you're looking at kind of the last 22 years, if you will, being a little bit lighter, then it kind of got heavy, 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 and kind of hit its peak where, you were talking the biggest, heaviest weights, around 2015, 16, 17. And then from there, things have, kind of changed in that manner, with the weights getting a little bit lighter. And, I think that, you have to be able to find that balance in order to test the athletes that are in the competition so that you have separation. So with strongman, I think that that's what's so important, is to put a weight out there based on the event that you're going to have separation with the athletes. So, you can certainly debate all day whether the weights have got lighter and the manner in which the world's strongest man is being conducted and run, or the Arnold, or any of these other contests out there. But if you don't have separation in the events, that's a pretty good indicator that the weights are too light. So I've always talked about the rule of thirds when it comes to competition, and any high level top competition, I really think you should have that separation. So a third of the athletes excel and do great, a third can do it but maybe struggle a little bit more, and then a third of the athletes are very challenged by it and or are unable to complete the weight or event that is in front of them. And then from there, as a spectator, anybody watching that event will be able to tell very quickly who is the strongest at that event, and you'll be able to see clearly where that is. So the weights, in my opinion, need to be heavy enough to have that separation. As far as your question about it hurting me personally, yes, of course. I mean, there's no other way to really say that and not answer your question and say, yes, it has impacted me, because historically speaking, for me, when the events got heavier and heavier, that's where I really stepped up to the plate and did better and better. So if there was a weight, for example, looking at, let's just say the bale tote that was at the Arnold, where the weight got super heavy and a lot of competitors weren't able to pick it up or weren't able to move more than a couple steps, I was able to pick it up and move the entire course. So as things got heavier, that's where I was able to separate more. And I really like that. So when it gets lighter and you're talking about more of a timed event where it's really coming down to a stopwatch and you have a lot of competitors that are separated by a matter of only a couple seconds, yes, that is going to hurt me. I would rather have the event be heavier where competitors are struggling to finish. But, I'm answering the question about me, and then hopefully that gives you some context about the sport and maybe, how things have, gone up and gone down, and maybe, who knows, maybe in the future it'll trend back up a little bit. What is the hardest part about fitting in training and also being a great dad and husband? I find myself having to choose between training and spending time with family. How do you find the balance to be so great at all of it? So what this really comes down to for me is being present in the moment and also being smart with my time. So, for example, if you go through your day and, whether it's spending time on social media or doing things that maybe take up some time and can potentially be time wasting things, if you take all of those things and add them up, so maybe it's 5 or 10 minutes here, 5 or 10 minutes there, 5 or 10 minutes there, eventually that's going to add up to a fairly significant amount of time. So even though it is tough, what I have tried to do with myself is to be disciplined in the fact that I'm not going to waste time. So maybe it's setting your alarm clock, 15, 20 minutes earlier, or working up to where you're maybe getting up 30 or 40 minutes earlier, and that allows you some time to be able to get your training in. When we're talking about training, I think it's important to think about how long you really need to train and what you're training for. So if your goal is just to get training in and not necessarily to, spend hours and hours in the gym, you can find time to fit that in. I feel like you can prioritize your time and, again, maybe cut out those little things where you're wasting time throughout the day, because the 24 hours in a day can be used in a lot of different ways. So if you break that down and think about it, and then, when it's time to work out, you go work out. When it's time to work, you go work. When it's time to spend time with your kids, you spend time with your kids. When it's time to spend time with your wife, you spend time with your wife. And in those moments, you're present for all of them. And when you can dial that in, and again, this is not something that's super easy to do, but when you can dial that in and you can be present for all those moments, it's very fulfilling at the end of the day to know that you were able to kind of check all of those boxes and, you know, go through the day and prioritize everything and get everything in. Because, you know, being a great dad, being a great husband is certainly very, very important. But if you don't work on your goals as well, and if one of your goals is working out and being able to get that in during the day, you just have to prioritize the time, because that will make you better. And in turn, you getting better yourself will make you a better dad. It'll make you a better husband, and it'll reflect in so many different areas of your life. So hopefully that helps, but just be present in the moment and, you know, take each moment and be there, be present. Would you ever consider training for and competing in a grip competition? That would be awesome to see. So there were a few different questions related to grip, about training for grip. When are we going to see some more grip footage, or, you know, training for grip, this type of thing, or training for competition? So what I will say is, as you guys know, I really enjoy, you know, grip training, feats of grip strength, things like that. So it's definitely something that we can do. We can bring out more content related to grip, and, you know, with some of the different individuals that I might be around here in the future, it might be really fun to put some stuff out about grip. So I don't know, as far as training for a grip contest, I would definitely say it might be fun. It might be something to go, you know, maybe challenge myself in a little bit different way, because I enjoy grip, but grip training has always primarily for me been a part of competing in strongman. So I built my grip up by doing strongman events and that type of thing, but I haven't really necessarily focused 100% on just building up my grip. So, you know, focusing on it and having some intent with my training toward getting ready for something like that might be kind of fun. How did you feel following the vegan day of eating? I've had a vegan fancy wrap style dinner at my sister's, and it literally destroyed my gut. Well, that's about how I felt. My gut was completely destroyed. I was trying not to complain too much about it during the filming of that video, but I was in a lot of pain and discomfort throughout that day. I mean, those foods just did not sit right with me. And I know there were some comments about, well, you didn't eat the right vegan food, or you should have done something different, or why did you eat that? Literally all we did is we did research on vegan food, where to find it, and went out and did the video. And, you know, it's one of those things where everybody after the fact certainly likes to critique it. And I'm not sitting here saying I'm a vegan food expert. I am not by any stretch of the imagination, but the foods that we did eat did not sit well with me, and it was not enjoyable whatsoever. You know, more power to people out there if that's what they choose to eat. Is obviously very atypical for me, and I paid the price for doing it.